In over 15 years of hosting Family Feud, Steve Harvey thought he had seen every possible thing that could happen on a game show stage. He had seen marriage proposals, family reunions, public confessions, and arguments that required commercial breaks to cool down. He had handled all of it, every single time. But on an afternoon in August 2025, something happened that Steve Harvey had never experienced, something that no game show host in television history has ever experienced. A woman stood up in the middle of the live audience, walked down the aisle, stepped to the edge of the stage, and announced that she was the husband's mistress. She did it in front of the wife, in front of the children, in front of 200 people, in front of every camera in the building. She just walked right in and detonated the entire room. And then, in the middle of the chaos and the shock and the gasps, the wife did something that nobody expected. Not Steve, not the audience, not the mistress, not even the husband. The wife's reaction was so shocking, so completely opposite of what everyone assumed would happen, that Steve Harvey stood on his own stage and could not process what he was witnessing. I'm telling you right now, this is the most unpredictable Family Feud story we have ever covered. The twist in this one is going to knock you sideways. If you are not subscribed to this channel, you need to fix that immediately. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and do not go anywhere. Let me tell you everything. The Coleman family from Richmond, Virginia, had been looking forward to their Family Feud appearance for months. For 38-year-old Nadine Coleman, it was more than a game show. It was one of the few things she had allowed herself to look forward to in what had been the worst year of her life. A year that had tested everything she believed about trust, about marriage, about the man she had spent 15 years building a life with. Because Nadine already knew about the affair. She had known for 7 months. Nadine was a middle school guidance counselor at a public school in Richmond. She had been in education for 12 years. Her days were spent sitting with 11, 12, and 13-year-olds who were navigating the hardest years of their young lives. Kids dealing with bullying, with family instability, with academic pressure, with the first raw experiences of grief and loss. Nadine was the person they came to, the person who listened, the person who helped them find their way through things they did not have the vocabulary to describe. She had a gift for it. Her principal called her the emotional backbone of the school. Parents wrote letters thanking her. Students came back years later to tell her she had changed their lives. But for 7 months, the woman who held everyone else together had been quietly falling apart inside her own home. 7 months ago, Nadine had discovered that her husband, 40-year-old Derek Coleman, was having an affair with a woman named Shayla. The discovery had not been dramatic. There was no caught in the act moment. No lipstick on the collar. Nadine had found the evidence in the most ordinary way imaginable. She had picked up Derek's phone to check the weather because hers was charging in the other room. A text notification had appeared on the lock screen. It was from a contact saved as S, and it read, "Last night was perfect. Miss you already." 3 sentences, 12 words, and Nadine's world had cracked open. Over the following weeks, Nadine had done what guidance counselors are trained to do. She gathered information, quietly, methodically. She checked phone records. She noticed patterns in Derek's schedule. She tracked the nights he claimed to be working late and cross-referenced them with his location data, which he had never thought to turn off. The affair had been going on for 10 months by the time Nadine discovered it. 10 months of lies. 10 months of fabricated work dinners and invented client meetings and late nights that had nothing to do with work. Derek was a regional manager for a chain of fitness centers in the Richmond area. He was charming, athletic, and socially magnetic, the kind of man who could walk into a room and make everyone feel like his best friend. That quality, the effortless charisma, was what had drawn Nadine to him 17 years ago. It was also what had drawn Shayla, a 29-year-old personal trainer at one of the fitness centers Derek managed. The affair had started with after-hours conversations that became dinner invitations that became something else entirely. Derek had compartmentalized it perfectly. Monday through Friday, he was a husband and father. Evenings and weekends, when he claimed to be at work, he was with Shayla. He had built a double life with the organizational skill of a man who managed multiple business locations, and he had maintained it without a single slip for 10 months. Until Nadine picked up his phone to check the weather. Nadine had made a decision after discovering the affair. She did not confront Derek immediately. She did not scream. She did not throw him out. She did something that required more strength than any of those reactions would have. She waited. She waited because she needed time to think. She needed to understand her options. She needed to consult an attorney, which she did, meeting with a family lawyer during her lunch breaks at school without telling anyone. She needed to secure herself financially, which she did, opening a separate savings account and quietly redirecting a portion of her direct deposit. and she needed to prepare herself emotionally, because Nadine had 3 children who were going to be affected by whatever happened next, and she was determined to handle this in a way that protected them above all else. Their 3 children stood with them on the stage. There was Malik, 15, a sophomore and standout track athlete who worshipped his father and who had no idea about the affair. Then there was Aisha, 12, a 7th grader who played cello and who was sensitive enough to have noticed her parents' emotional distance, but too young to understand its source. And the youngest was Darius, 8, a 2nd grader who was focused entirely on the excitement of being on television and who had asked Steve Harvey for an autograph during the warm-up. Now, here is the detail that changes everything. The detail that nobody in that studio knew except Nadine and her attorney. Nadine had not just been waiting and preparing for 7 months. She had been planning, not a confrontation, not a scene, something much more strategic. Nadine had used the 7 months to build a complete, documented case for the divorce proceedings she intended to file the Monday after the Family Feud taping. She had financial records, phone records, location data, and a timeline that her attorney described as the most thorough documentation he had ever seen from a client. Nadine was not coming apart. She was coming prepared. The Family Feud trip was supposed to be one last good memory for the children before the world they knew changed forever. That was the plan, but the plan did not account for Shayla. The game started normally. The Colemans were matched against the Rivera family from Miami. Steve Harvey worked the room with his usual energy. The first 2 rounds were competitive and entertaining. Derek was his usual charming self, cracking jokes with Steve and playing to the audience. Nadine played well, smiling and engaging, showing no sign of the 7-month secret she was carrying. The children were having a wonderful time. Malik was competitive and focused. Aisha was charming the audience. Darius was waving at everyone he could see. For 2 rounds, the Coleman family looked like every other happy family that had ever appeared on the show. The disruption came between the 2nd and 3rd rounds. During a brief pause while the production team reset the board, a commotion began in the audience. A woman had stood up from her seat in the 8th row. She was moving down the aisle toward the stage. Production assistants attempted to redirect her, but she moved past them with determined speed. She reached the edge of the stage and stopped. She was in her late 20s, dressed impeccably, and her eyes were locked directly on Derek Coleman. "Derek!" She said his name loudly enough for every microphone in the building to capture it. The studio went instantly quiet. 200 people turned to look at the woman standing at the edge of the stage. Steve Harvey turned. The Rivera family turned. Nadine turned. And Derek's face underwent a transformation that would be analyzed frame by millions of viewers. He went white. His mouth opened. His eyes went wide with the particular terror of a man whose 2 worlds have just collided in the worst possible location on Earth. "My name is Shayla," the woman announced, her voice carrying across the silent studio. "I have been seeing Derek for almost a year and a half. He told me his marriage was over. He told me they were separated. He told me the Family Feud taping was something he was doing for the kids as one last family thing before the divorce. I came today to support him because I thought this was the end of something. But I am standing here looking at his wife and his children, and this is clearly not a family that is separated. And I deserve the truth." The studio erupted into the most chaotic reaction in Family Feud history. The sound was enormous, a mixture of gasps, shouts, and the buzzing disbelief of 200 people processing a live soap opera. The Rivera family stood frozen across the stage. Steve Harvey gripped the podium with both hands, his face cycling through shock, anger, and something that looked like genuine distress. Derek stood at the contestant line looking like a man watching his entire life collapse in slow motion. Malik stared at his father with an expression that was transitioning from confusion to devastating comprehension. Aisha grabbed her mother's arm. Darius looked around with wide, frightened eyes, not understanding what was happening but feeling the tidal wave of emotion that had just crashed through the room. And then there was Nadine. Every camera in the studio found her. Every person in the audience looked at her. Every viewer at home leaned forward expecting tears, expecting a scream, expecting the explosion that always comes when a wife is confronted with her husband's affair in public. But what Nadine did shocked every single person in that building, including Steve Harvey. Nadine did not scream. She did not cry. She did not lunge at Derek or Shayla. She turned to Shayla, and in a voice that was so calm and so controlled that it seemed to belong to a different dimension than the chaos surrounding it, she said, "I know who you are. I have known for 7 months." The studio went from chaos to absolute silence in less than 2 seconds. The transition was so abrupt that it felt physical, like the air pressure in the room had changed. Shayla's confident expression faltered. Derek's mouth fell open even further. Steve Harvey took a visible step backward, physically reacting to the shock of Nadine's composure. Nadine continued, still looking at Shayla. He told you they were separated. He lied to you the same way he lied to me. You are not the villain in this story. You were given the same false information I was given for 10 months before I found out. The only difference is that I found out 7 months ago and I have been preparing for this moment ever since. She paused. But not this moment specifically. I was not planning for you to walk into this studio. I was planning to file for divorce on Monday. Steve Harvey found his voice, but it came out rough and unsteady. Nadine, I need to understand what I am hearing. You have known about the affair for 7 months and you did not confront your husband. Nadine looked at Steve with steady, clear eyes. Mr. Harvey, I am a guidance counselor. I teach 12-year-olds that when something devastating happens, you do not react. You respond. Reacting is emotional and impulsive and serves nobody. Responding is strategic and thoughtful and serves the people who depend on you. I have 3 children who depend on me, so I did not react. I responded. I met with a lawyer. I secured my finances. I documented everything. I prepared myself and my children for what comes next. I was going to do this the right way, quietly, privately, with dignity. She glanced at Shayla, then back at Steve. But since it is happening publicly instead, I will say what I plan to say on Monday. Derek, I know about everything. The texts, the dinners, the hotels, the location data that puts you at her apartment on 47 separate occasions. I know about the money you spent. I know about the lies you told me and apparently the lies you told her. And I am done. Not because of what you did, because of who you chose to become while you were doing it. You looked at me every single night for 10 months and you lied. You sat across from me at dinner and you lied. You kissed your children goodnight and you lied. The affair is not the worst part. The lying to my face every single day while I held this family together is the worst part. The standing ovation was primal. The entire studio was on its feet with a force that felt like it could lift the roof off the building. People were crying, cheering, clapping with their hands above their heads. The raw power of a woman who had been betrayed in the most public way imaginable, responding not with hysteria, but with the devastating precision of someone who had spent 7 months turning pain into preparation, was unlike anything the Family Feud stage had ever witnessed. Malik, the 15-year-old, turned to his father. His face was wet with tears and contorted with a betrayal that was uniquely painful because it came from a place of worship. Dad, I wanted to be you. I told my friends I wanted to be like my dad. What do I tell them now? Derek had no answer. He stood with his head bowed, tears falling onto the stage floor, destroyed by a question that no rehearsed apology could address. Aisha was holding onto Nadine, her face pressed against her mother's side. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her silence was its own testimony. A 12-year-old who had felt the distance between her parents for months without understanding why, now understanding everything and wishing she did not. Darius pulled on Nadine's hand. Mama, who is that lady? Why is Daddy crying? Nadine knelt down right there on the stage and held her youngest son's face in her hands. Baby, Daddy made a mistake, a big one, but Mama has everything figured out. I promise you we are going to be okay. It was the same composure, the same strategic calm, the same protect the children first instinct that had guided every decision she had made for 7 months. Steve turned to Derek. His voice was quiet now, all the showmanship stripped away. Sir, your wife just showed this entire country what strength looks like. She found out about your affair 7 months ago. And instead of falling apart, she got a lawyer, she secured her family, she documented everything, and she prepared to handle this like a professional. While you were lying to 2 women, she was building a lifeboat for her children. That is the difference between the 2 of you. You were breaking your family. She was already rebuilding it. Then Steve did something unexpected. He addressed Shayla, who was still standing at the edge of the stage. Ma'am, I do not know your full story, but I do know you were lied to. He told you the marriage was over. It was not. You came here today believing one thing and learning another. That does not make you a villain. It makes you another person this man deceived. It was a moment of grace that surprised the audience. Several people in the crowd nodded. Shayla, who had arrived as an unwitting grenade, stood at the edge of the stage with tears streaming down her face, realizing that she and Nadine had more in common than either of them had expected. They had both been lied to by the same man. Steve stopped the game. He told the production team that the Coleman family would receive the full prize value of the rounds they had completed, regardless of the final score. Then he turned to Nadine. Nadine, I have hosted this show for a very long time. I have never seen anyone handle something like this the way you just did. Your husband's affair was exposed on national television by the other woman walking into my studio, and you did not break. You stood there and told everyone you already knew. That you had been preparing for 7 months. That you had a lawyer, a plan, and the strength to protect your children through all of it. That is not just composure. That is power. Steve's foundation announced it would provide Nadine with a $20,000 family stability grant to support her and her children through the transition ahead, covering immediate living expenses, counseling services, and whatever else she determined her family needed. Steve also connected her with a women's legal advocacy group in Richmond that provided pro bono support for women navigating divorce proceedings. The audience responded with extended, emotional applause. When the episode aired 3 weeks later, it generated the most explosive response in Family Feud's modern history. The clip was viewed over 120 million times across platforms in the first week, surpassing every previous record. The moment Nadine said, "I have known for 7 months," became the single most replayed moment in the show's history. News outlets worldwide covered the story. Morning shows devoted entire segments to it. Relationship experts analyzed it. Social media was consumed by it for over 2 weeks. But the conversation that dominated was not about the affair itself. It was about Nadine's response. The hashtag #IResponded trended globally for 11 days, the longest trend in Family Feud history. Nadine's distinction between reacting and responding became a framework that was adopted by therapists, life coaches, educators, and corporate trainers. When something devastating happens, you do not react, you respond. The sentence was printed on posters for guidance counselor offices across the country. It was quoted in articles about emotional intelligence, crisis management, and personal resilience. A guidance counselor from Richmond, Virginia, had articulated a principle so clear and so powerful that it transcended the game show stage and entered the broader cultural vocabulary. Equally significant was the conversation about Shayla. Steve Harvey's decision to address her with empathy rather than condemnation sparked a national discussion about the narrative surrounding affairs. The traditional story positions the other woman as the villain. Steve's response complicated that narrative by pointing out that Shayla had been lied to as well. "That does not make you a villain. It makes you another person this man deceived." The line generated intense debate. Some agreed that Shayla deserved compassion. Others argued that she bore responsibility regardless of Derek's lies. The conversation was nuanced, respectful, and ongoing for weeks, which was precisely the kind of discussion that drove comment section engagement and sharing. The impact on the Coleman family was the most challenging and ultimately the most complete transformation of any family in the series. Nadine filed for divorce on Monday, exactly as she had planned. The proceedings were swift because of her 7 months of documentation. Her attorney later told a reporter that Nadine's preparation was the most thorough he had encountered in 20 years of family law. The divorce was finalized within 4 months. Nadine and the children stayed in the family home. Derek moved out. Custody was shared with Nadine as the primary custodial parent. The children entered family therapy. Malik, who had idolized his father, struggled the most. The betrayal had shattered something fundamental in his understanding of the world. But over time, with therapy and with the steady, unshakable presence of his mother, he began to rebuild. He channeled his pain into his running. He broke his school's 400-meter record that spring. When a reporter asked him about his performance, Malik said, "My mom taught me that when something knocks you down, you do not stay down. You get up and you run." The quote was shared hundreds of thousands of times. Nadine was promoted to lead counselor at her school, overseeing the guidance department and mentoring 3 junior counselors. She started a workshop series called Respond, Don't React for parents and educators dealing with crisis situations. The curriculum was built on the same principles she had applied in her own life. Gather information before acting, protect the people who depend on you, plan strategically, and never let someone else's behavior dictate the quality of your response. The program was adopted by 8 schools in the Richmond district within its first year. The Virginia Department of Education cited it in a report on best practices for school-based crisis counseling. Shayla reached out to Nadine 4 months after the episode aired. The conversation was private, but Nadine later shared that Shayla had apologized and that Nadine had accepted it. "She was lied to by the same person who lied to me," Nadine told a reporter. "I am not going to punish her for his deception. We were both casualties of the same lie." The statement was shared widely and became a reference point in conversations about how women navigate the aftermath of infidelity, not as adversaries but as individuals who were both harmed by the same broken trust. 6 months after the episode aired, Family Feud brought Nadine back for a follow-up. She came with Malik, Aisha, and Darius. Steve greeted her with an embrace that lasted longer than any he had given on the show. "How are you doing, Nadine?" "Really?" Nadine smiled. "Mr. Harvey, I am divorced. I am promoted. My children are in therapy and they are healing. My son broke a school record. My daughter started a journal. My youngest sleeps through the night without asking where his daddy is. And I am standing here 6 months later proving what I told you the first time. When something devastating happens, you do not react. You respond. And I responded. Steve closed with the words that would define the season. In all my years on this stage, I have never witnessed anything like what Nadine Coleman showed the world. Her husband's mistress walked into this studio unannounced, on live television, in front of her children. And Nadine looked at everyone and said, I already knew. She already knew. She had known for 7 months. And in those 7 months, while her husband was lying to 2 women, Nadine was meeting with a lawyer, securing her finances, documenting everything, and building a plan that would protect her children. She did not react. She responded. And that response was so powerful, so composed, and so devastatingly strategic that it became a lesson for the entire country. He looked into the camera. If life has ever blindsided you, if someone has ever broken your trust, if you are sitting right now in the middle of something that feels impossible, remember Nadine. You do not have to react. You can respond. And a well-prepared response will always be more powerful than an emotional reaction, always. If this story left you speechless, I need you to do one thing right now. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell, and share this video with every person who has ever been betrayed, blindsided, or underestimated. Share it with someone who is in the middle of their own storm and needs to hear that there is a way through it that does not involve falling apart. Tell them what Nadine taught the world. You do not react, you respond. And your response can be so powerful that it changes everything. Not just for you, for everyone watching. I will see you in the next one.